Hi, my name's John, and for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm working on getting my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. And so if you don't want any spoilers for Persona 5 Royal, make sure to click off this video right now because today we are going to be talking about Dr. Maruki's session with Sumire Yoshizawa. And oh, God, this one is an experience. So if you like this kind of content, you want to see more of it coming from this channel, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss another upload. And why not even sharing the video with your friends wherever you like sharing things, whether that's Twitter, Discord, WhatsApp, or anything else. But with all of that out of the way, let's just jump into the video. So before we actually get started with this session, I think a little bit of background is in order, because Dr. Maruki, this happens before he is a counselor at Shujin Academy and before he gets to know any of the Phantom Thieves besides Sumire here. And so this is him at his own private practice. And so I want to take a look at how the room is set up and how Dr. Maruki has actually positioned himself. So he puts a large desk, a computer, and some snacks in between the two of them, kind of creating that inherent physical separation between the counselor and the client, kind of creating an unnecessary power dynamic in this situation. This is something that he doesn't do at Shujin, and which is why I think he's able to, with a lot of those students, the Harus, the Jokers, the Ons, he's able to develop a better therapeutic relationship with them because they're much more on even playing fields. Yeah, he has a clipboard that's separating them, but that's just kind of to take notes, maybe to reference back some information. It's not too terrible, but this creates very concrete barriers between the two of them. So developing a relationship with a counselor like that might be a little bit more difficult. So on top of that, this kind of physical barrier that could be unconsciously playing into Sumire's lack of wanting to get to know him or open up to him. We also see that this is something that I just hadn't picked up on, but someone left a comment on one of the older counseling student reacts, and it made a lot of sense to me, and I agree fully, so I'll pop that up right here. And they said that he's wearing a lab coat. Now, I just took this to be, JRPG trope, they're wearing kind of quirky clothing, but it does make sense that wearing that lab coat could be so intimidating to so many students, because when you think lab coat, you don't think approachable dude that I can just come hang out with. Yes, he's wearing the sandals, and he's got the rolled up chinos, and that helps a little bit, but lab coats are inherently a sign of power, a sign of intimidation, and a sign of professionalism. I don't know how comfortable I would be as a counselor talking to another counselor who is wearing a lab coat, because I would see them as, oh wow, they're so much more professional than me, they're way up here, I'm kind of down here, and it would be harder to develop that therapeutic relationship to open up to them. Maruki's a really approachable guy, but the lab coat, I don't know, it's just not the move here. But with all that in mind, kind of the environmental factors, I like that he has a plant. It brings a little bit of life, a little bit of warmth to the counseling environment that he curated himself. So that's good. I don't know. Let's just actually jump into the session, though. Doing some introductions, and he thanks her for coming to see him. She's not sure what to discuss. Okay, so I like how he has, obviously, a nice warm greeting, because she's already given him a lot of information regarding kind of where she's at. And because this is his own private practice, I don't know how he screens clients before they come in to talk with him. I don't know if he has an intake evaluation that they have to take in the waiting room before the first counseling session, so he gets a vibe for where they're at. I don't know if he goes in blind. I don't know if there's a session before that's more of an intake session, so that someone else talks to them and then they give Maruki the information regarding the client before he sees them. I don't know how they came about to have this counseling relationship, but it's likely that he already has a gist of why she's coming in. And so he knows to be very warm and inviting, and I think that that's great. But he also sees where she's at mentally just by her nonverbals. Her head, a lot of times, is down. The way her voice sounds, she has a very muted affect, which if you watch my video about Sumire and her struggles with what I believe to be major depressive disorder even before her sister's death, this makes a lot of sense, and it gives him a lot of insight into where she is at in terms of this session right here in the present moment, which operating from the standpoint that your client will likely be different from week to week. Every single time you meet with them, they're going to be slightly different. A lot can happen in a week, so meeting them where they're at right now is so essential for a counselor. And so I think that him opening up, he does this in a lot of his sessions, and I always really like it, saying that there's no pressure to talk if you're not comfortable, especially since she said that her parents are making her come here. She's not here necessarily of her own volition or her own free will. So saying you just want to chat till time's up, it kind of takes a little bit of pressure, since she doesn't even really know what she wants to talk about, and she might not feel comfortable since she just endured a hugely traumatic event. So taking it slow, definitely a good move from Maruki here. He'll need to be on his A game if he does have some basis as to why she's here, though. And as always, inviting her to have some snacks. And yeah, she's not feeling it. Okay, this might seem strange, but I actually really like that this is the topic that he chose to talk with Sumire about. Whether he has context regarding what she's gone through, which he likely does, or not, this is a pretty tame kind of conversation piece that they can get into. Because what if he asked, how's your week going? Well, probably pretty terribly. So that's probably not a good way to kick off a conversation with someone who may not be overly keen on talking with you in the first place, right after they experienced a severe trauma. And so, what do you like to do in your free time? That's always a common one that people pull out of their pockets. Well, that's gymnastics. That inherently is connected with her sister, who just recently died as well. Probably not something that you want to dive straight into first thing, unless she feels comfortable, but even then, because this is dealing with a lot of trauma, you need to take that and work with that piece by piece. If she just blurted out all of the traumatic things that have happened recently and just completely expelled that, that could get risky in the opening moments, just because you want to make sure to never re-traumatize your client. So him saying something very mundane as, what did you eat for lunch yesterday? I kind of like that. It eases them into conversation. It starts building that rapport, building that trust. So, okay, pretty good so far. Silence. He picks up on the silence, and I love that he starts self-disclosing a little bit, kind of gets the ball rolling by talking about his Apple story. And she's very uninterested, but I like that he's genuinely just kind of going all out with it. And she's starting to open up a little bit, even if it's just talking about how she likes to cook with apples. She makes plenty of food, and she's very familiar. And he provides her with support, unconditional positive regard, and really hones in on her strengths, mainly about caring about nutrition and being able to cook. I think that this is good. It helps to build a relationship. It helps to build a rapport. And it is kind of using, to a small extent, kind of a strengths-based approach. Realizing that, yeah, you're kind of down right now, but look at these great things that you're still able to think of and do that could potentially bring a client up. Probably not in this context, just because of what she's experiencing, but doing it in a way that's not patronizing. I think gotta give Maruki props for that. He's making conversation, which sometimes just being able to carry on that conversation is good in these kinds of contexts. Saying you're really on top of things. And yeah, this, when working with clients who may have a lot on their mind, on their chest, they will be a bit slower to talk, and allowing that silence, allowing to go at their pace is incredibly important. Something I haven't talked about, just because we haven't been able to hear his sessions until this point, is vocal tone and pace. These are very important concepts when you are working in a counseling setting, because let's say a client comes in presenting similarly to Kasumi, and you as the counselor see that they're feeling very low, their energy level is very low, and maybe they're moving a bit slower, and you start talking like this, and you're really excited, and you're just trying to get them excited. That's going to, that would overwhelm a lot of people. That would overwhelm me. And trying to have that very stark contrast in energy and pace and rate of speech, not great. Having that very high vocal tone that's almost artificial, not great. But what Maruki does, which I think is genuinely very good in this context up to this point, is that he tends to match her pace. He's not talking too much faster, too much slower than Kasumi is. She takes some longer breaks than he does, but he also sits in that silence. But he keeps his voice a bit lower, kind of keeping it at that soothing tone, with the occasional kind of uptick towards the end of his phrases.
So, you're Sumire Yoshizawa, huh? I'm Dr. Maruki. I'll be your counselor. First of all, thank you for coming to see me.
Yes. Thank you for seeing me. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what to discuss. I only came here today because my parents wanted me to.
That's fine. So, do you want to just chat until our time's up then?
He's trying to bring her energy up unconsciously a little bit, but not forcefully. And so I think that that's really good in this particular context. He doesn't do the voice uptick more. I wish he did, because that could help raise her energy just a little bit unconsciously, but he does it every now and then, and I like that. But overall, I like how his vocal tone and pace are operating in this session. And now, with this question, asking whether or not practice has been rough lately, I like this because with the cooking question, he was able to open up the conversation a little bit more. She's the one that brought up gymnastics. And so he figures, okay, this might be something that we can kind of dive into a little bit deeper, because she's the one that brought that up. And so now he can say, how's practice been going? Has it been rough lately? Now, while I think that this is a good kind of segue, I think that this is a good route to take in the session, I just would nitpick a very little bit, and instead of saying, has practice been rough lately, just asking more of an open-ended question where she can't give a yes or no answer. She doesn't say yes or no, she elaborates a bit more than that anyways, so it doesn't have a great impact on the session, but instead just saying something along the lines of, how has practice been for you lately? That way she can give her own answer, instead of using your words and just saying, yep, it's been rough, or no, it's been fine. But let's continue on. She says it's nothing that she can't handle, even though it has been rough. And again, he says, do you enjoy gymnastics? I think that this is an okay closed question in this context, because very well, she could just say yes or no, and then he could just probe further into that. It would be easier of saying, how do you feel about gymnastics? Again, going with the, how do you feel about this? That very stereotypical counselor language. But I do think that it could be beneficial in this particular context to open up those questions a little bit more. But she, again, because the writers don't want a boring scene, she responds pretty well anyway, so it doesn't have an overall bad impact on the session. And now she's getting into her sister. And now we see she's hitting on what's really troubling her in this session. And this is where it gets tricky, because when dealing with trauma, you have to be very delicate and you have to be very intentional in what you do as a counselor. So allowing her to get off what she needs to get off of her chest is important, but you need to be able to process it piece by piece, like I mentioned earlier, because you don't want to run the risk of, in your counseling session, re-traumatizing or re-experiencing that trauma to a detrimental degree. It's a very delicate balancing act when working with a client in this capacity, because you do not want them to leave this session in a very bad mental state, because you won't see them again for a week. So being very careful, and Maruki should, in a perfect world, he would proceed very carefully from this point forward, while still providing that unconditional positive regard and providing this as a good, healthy outlet to be able to talk about some of the things that Sumire is dealing with right now. And so saying, I can't do it anymore, I can't just go on like this. Let's see where he goes from here. And if you've played through the game, well, we're gonna go on a journey. Okay. She starts talking about how Kasumi could have done it. And he provides an opening for her to continue getting things off her chest, which I think he should have processed through what she had just told him. She just told him a lot. And so there was plenty of opportunities to start processing through what she was saying, what she meant, because she did say a lot of different pieces in that segment. So instead of saying, get everything out, I would have processed through what she had already talked about and slowly let the story unravel, instead of it just all getting out there and trying to figure out where to start processing. And so that reopening that, while I don't think that he meant any harm by it, I think that that's just something that might differ from counselor to counselor. My personal perspective, though, is that they should have processed a little bit before continuing on this path, so that he's seeing some kinds of mindsets that may not necessarily be healthy in Sumire right now, and trying to begin working on those would be prudent. But now she says, sometimes I can't help but think things would have been better if I was Kasumi Yoshizawa. I'll be honest, I don't really want to hit the play button here. Okay, let's go. I'm clenched. he's supporting her delusions. So I don't need to explain why this is a terrible thing he just said, right? You're telling me that supporting a young girl's delusions about wanting to become her sister, who just died, a young girl who is inundated with grief over the death of her older sister, who she thinks it's her fault. So she's also dealing with a high level of survivor's guilt. That's not a crazy idea for her to try and become that sister. Really? Really? That's the advice? That's the professional counseling advice that you're going to give? That's what your counseling education taught you is okay. What? I mean, you've heard me say, if you've watched this channel for any period of time, that it is the counselor's role to empower the client, right? So him saying this while he's agreeing with her, just because he's agreeing with what she's saying and saying, that's not a crazy idea at all, that's not empowering. That's literally telling her that, you're probably right. You probably don't have the capability to deal with these issues yourself. So you should pretend to be your sister, who he doesn't know that much about her situation. This is the first time that they met. If he did, he would realize that she already, even prior to her sister's death, had a massive inferiority complex and was already suffering, likely, again, from major depression. So you're just gonna say, yeah, you're right. She would be better at this. You should just be her. What? What? Okay, so as a counselor, we are taught, and it's hammered into our heads, that there are 5 ethical principles that we are to abide by, to be ethical practitioners. The first one being autonomy. So maintaining and encouraging the autonomy of the client. Okay, the next one being justice. That meaning that you will treat all clients fairly and the same, unless there is a need for you to treat them differently. Let's say that means that a client comes in, they're blind, you make sure to provide them with Braille. So while you aren't treating them exactly the same as another client, it's justified 100%. Beneficence, which means that you are constantly working towards and supporting the welfare of the client in whatever ways is most beneficial for them as an individual. Okay? Non-maleficence, and I don't mean the Disney villain, Maleficent, although it kind of makes sense, but non-maleficence is, you've probably heard of this in the medical field, whatever you do, do no harm. Do no harm. Are you telling me that there can be no harm done to Sumire by telling her to pretend to be her older sister or mirror her actions? And the last one being fidelity. So your responsibility to maintain trust in the therapeutic relationship. He breaches 3 it could be argued 4 out of 5 of those core principles. The man has his own agenda entirely. He has no interest in ethics as long as the way that he thinks that he should help someone is fulfilled. That's all that matters. He doesn't care about actual counseling, evidence-based counseling practices. If Maruki thinks it's the best way to go, that's the way to go. And that is so dangerous. That is so arrogant. And let's pretend that in a minute, he doesn't use his magical persona power, and she just leaves the session after he talks to her like this. Let's remove this from the context that he's about to brainwash her, which, words about that here in a second. But this could do so much additional damage that would take so many more years to help unravel and actually get her to a stable place because of this mistreatment. I get that he is trying his best. I get that. And no counselor is perfect. I get that. I'm a counseling student. I'm still learning. I get that. But this is so beyond the scope of unethical, irresponsible work with someone that I hope no one watches this and is like, wow, what he did with Kasumi, I want a piece of that. Because, oh god, okay. I think he knows what he's doing, though. He knows exactly what he's doing. He is not a stupid person. Everyone's capable of changing themselves. True. Oh. And she says that he starts getting her to talk about what her sister would be like if she were in her shoes. And she reiterates that she wants to become Kasumi. And he tells her to just believe in herself and closes her eyes. He works his actualization magic and he changes her cognition. And okay, I hear the arguments that it was her choice, so it was autonomous. No, that's completely stripping her of any and all autonomy, because now she can't remember that she was Sumire. He essentially erased his client in favor of a more well-adjusted one, who is her sister. So he completely said, your problems, you can't work through them. Just be your sister. You'll feel better. You'll feel better. So now, even if she wanted to change her mind, she can't, because she doesn't even know her mind was changed in the first place. She doesn't remember that she made this choice. She's just Kasumi now. And so, completely stripping her of any and all autonomy for literal months. Almost, I'm not sure exactly when this happens, but probably almost a year. And so, this is just incredibly disturbing. Not surprising, let's be honest. But it's disturbing that this is how this went down. Because he's the counselor. You put a lot of trust into someone that you go to see for counseling to be able to help you with your issues. And I understand that Sumire later in the game does admit that she's grateful for what Maruki did for her, even through these awful, unconventional means. But that's just her. If she'd never met Joker, if she'd never met the Phantom Thieves, and her cognition was reverted without all of that catharsis, surrounding it, of her coming to terms with her grief, to some extent, obviously, probably not fully at first, but she would have gone from Kasumi back to Sumire once they destroyed his palace, and that would have been very, very bad, because her dopamine levels would have plummeted, and she would have been in a very dark place after not being herself for so long. He puts her in so much danger just out of sheer arrogance and him thinking that he knows what's best for her. And he's operating out of a private practice now. Now, I'm not saying that I don't know if he did this to anyone else besides Rumi and Sumire, but he very well could have. So what happened to all of those clients that he actualized after their worlds came crumbling down, after his palace was destroyed? Were they just back to square zero? What happened? Because it's not like he only ever had one client. It's very unlikely that he would be able to survive with only one client before going to Shujin. So his lack of foresight for the future, this isn't a tried and tested method of counseling that he's doing to fix these people. It could run out in 5 years, it could run out in 6 months. He doesn't know how this works. He just knows that in the short run, it changes their mind, and so it's like, great. Okay, he's well-intentioned, but just because someone is well-intentioned and kind does not mean that they have your best interest at heart. You need to work with someone so that you have that level of autonomy and you are empowered in these counseling sessions to find what is best for you. And you are the most vital piece of that puzzle. And well, I won't call Joker a counselor, but she is, through her relationship with him, able to kind of move towards discovering who she is and starting to move past her grief and her depressive symptoms. Obviously, depression isn't something that just goes away like that, but she is able to start finding ways to move forward. Okay. Let's keep going. He's an amazing doctor. He's so smug about it, too. No. He called it his counseling approach. That's not... And then she does the visual transition into Sumire. And she says that she's been reborn all over again. And he's being a nice guy, and he says to drop by again whenever she gets a chance. I guess that's good. If she needs anything, I guess that's good. Look, I'll be the first one to say that in some of his sessions, Maruki does a good job. He does a good job. With Makoto, he does pretty decently. With Haru, I'm really impressed with how he worked with Haru. But the man makes so many unethical blunders. It's kind of irredeemable for him from a counseling perspective. For him as a counselor, I don't think he's an irredeemable character. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he made bad choices, and he is a very bad counselor for all of the reasons that we listed. Also, I'll just throw this in at the end. He never really expressed confidentiality in this session. Figure I'd tag that here at the end. Oh, I'm gonna need a snack after this one. But that'll do it for today's video, guys, and I want to pass the question off to you. What do you think of Maruki as a counselor? How do you think his methods are? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and why you're in the comment section, why you're liking this video, why subscribing to the channel, and why not even ringing that notification bell so you never miss another upload. And why not even sharing this video if you enjoyed it wherever you like sharing things, whether that's Discord, Reddit, Twitter, or anywhere else. But as always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, a fantastic rest of your week, and why not even a fantastic rest of your month. And I will see you in the next video. Later. Jesus, he sucks at this.